Hey guys, so this is Hovr 10.0 analysis. I know we're going to talk about Archer a lot here because, well, quite frankly, there was a big report that came out on Archer, a bear report, and people are a little bit worried, and rightfully so. I was actually quite worried when I first saw it. And it took me a little bit of time to analyze and see what's really happening and what this is all really about. But this is about Hovr, this video, and this is about why I'm bullish on Hovr, so we'll get to that. We're going to talk about Brandon Robinson's response also to this bear report. In general, I'm calling this Archer comp because it's good to compare, what other people in the industry are doing, right? In real estate, we use comps a lot. I use because I'm a realtor, by the way, and people always ask for comps because they want to know the value of nearby properties if they're going to purchase something, right? So same with this, we should evaluate, what other people are doing in the industry. Archer is one of the biggest in the space, and it's quite important to look at. So that's just the big why of why I'm doing this video. And now we're going to deep dive into all the different things. So, all right, we're going to talk about the report, Brandon's response, a little bit what it actually takes to get certified, because some of this really is about certification. The big thing that I took away from the report is that they are claiming that they are not going to get certified. Their vehicle is extremely flawed. So we're going to talk a little about what it takes to get certified, and then why I think HOVR has no problem getting certification. We are going to make this happen, just like Brandon Robinson says. So starting off at the top, they actually have two reports. Some people don't know, and I didn't really see many people talk about it. But first of all, let's talk about the fact that Grizzly Research, they have a bear in their logo, quite literally a grizzly bear. So they are bearish on companies. They always actually just talk about why companies are going to go down, almost never up. So in general, I don't like that. They're just a net negative to the stock market, to the economy, and their incentive really is just to make money off of shorting companies. And incentive is very important when looking at why they're talking about these things. So I think they're making a lot of claims that are not substantiated. There's no evidence, and we can actually look at this by their 2023 report and assess how were they right or wrong. Let's see. So we're not going to talk too much about the new report because a lot of people are already talking about it. You can find stuff online, but I want to compare their track record for Archer. So they claimed that it was mostly hype, few real flights, mostly recycled footage, misleading DoD deal, partnered lured with cheap warrants, especially Boeing and Wisk, overly rosy factory timelines, and FAA path timeline they thought was unrealistic. This is the only one that they are not really there yet. So let's see here. The bottom line, it's all fake flights. Thread didn't age well. Archer flight test records is now substantial, including transition and piloted ops. They actually have over 400 flights, it said, 400 test flights by September 2024. I don't even know how much by now. So big wrong one for them there. Right here, DoD was misleading. They actually did complete deliveries. Also partnered, bought with cheap warrants, partly true, but partnership did held on. Stellantis actually doubled down. Where is it here? Stellantis doubled down and the factory was built. The only thing that they have on them maybe from the report still is that the certification, also, even though they doubled down, I think the factory was built a little bit late. So, a little bit maybe delays and stuff like that, which something we're going to talk about, Brandon Robinson also talks about. There's an information gap that he laughs about. Maybe there might be a little wrong on the timelines, but they got it done, right? Certification by X date, skepticism remains the hardest to judge. Archer made credible FAA progress, but no type certification yet. So the report timeline risk hasn't been disproven, but they did make a lot of progress. So far, everything in their first report is wrong. So I would definitely take their second report with a grain of salt. It seems like they're double downing on what they're trying to go after. So let's see what their second report claims and compare that to the first a little bit. The Midnight is fundamentally flawed, and likely uncertifiable under FAA rules. Archer certification timeline and production statements are overstated. Site visits to Covingstone saw little to no production despite scaling claims. I don't know. It's funny because first they said they're not going to make a production facility. It's all, BS. And now they're saying, okay, they got a production facility, but they're actually working really slow. They're saying they're working faster than they are. All right, man, give them a break. At least they're, it takes time to scale, just like Tesla. It took them a long time to scale production, but they got it done. That's what's important. They said they're not going to fly. They flew over 400 flights. And now they're saying that their aircraft is fundamentally flawed for certification. I think this is one of the only claims that are quite interesting. We'll talk about Brandon's response to this and then a little bit about my opinion on this as well. And then they have a $6 billion order book, which Brandon also talks about. A lot of these companies got all these pre-orders, LOIs, MOUs. These are non-binding agreements, and they're claiming it on their balance sheets, which that's fine. I guess they want to. It brings some. I guess it does have some value, but they are not binding. Who knows if they're really going to happen and get this 500 million and there's 6 billion in their order book. These are the two things that I actually do kind of have a concern for Archer, but I'm not selling Archer. I actually do own some stock. Let's see. Defense Pivot is more PR than capability. Joby is better positioned. Now, a lot of the report, they are just clearly trying to promote Joby and make people sell Archer. They're definitely one-sided. So let's get into that a little bit. All right. Actually, let's get into their track record before we get to that. All right. Their track record. Archer's first transition flight happened about here. Stock went up, and then the Grizzly Bear report came out, and actually it did decline a bit down, but ever since then, it actually is up, and Grizzly was definitely wrong from that report. Let's look at Grizzly's total track record, which is something to kind of consider. Right here, I don't care about this side right here. This compares to the S&P 500. I just care about this, their actual nominal return since publication. So as you can see here for Archer, it's one of the only ones that they have wrong. No, they have a few wrong. What am I saying? But right there, Archer, they're wrong by 36%. It's actually been up from what they said. It was $6.56, and now we're sitting at about $9. Even more, it was at like $13, right? So very wrong there. But you can see their track record. They do have quite some red ones, quite some wrong ones, but they do have a lot of green ones too, especially some that are literally 100%, like the companies have died. So it's a little interesting to look at. But again, I really don't think they are correct here with Archer, except maybe for a few things. But I would not be short Archer right now. In general, the whole eVTOL market's going up. So let's talk about Brandon's response here a bit. All right. So Brandon responded to someone on LinkedIn who posted about the report. They talked a lot about it. I'm not going to talk about what the other people said. Just we'll kind of cut to Brandon's stuff. And he's right about here. While there are some good points, there is a lot of fluff in this report, many things that are factually incorrect. In the end, this is a negative report containing many errors that is written by a firm that specializes in shorting companies, has been extensively litigated for defamation. That's right, they're under a lawsuit for defamations, and directly benefits when the covered stock prices fall. So, right, incentive, matters here. So that's why they're producing this report. I'm not sure how promoting a piece like this contributes to anything useful other than amplifying an underlying purpose of making short sellers like themselves money. I agree. It's just a net negative for the entire industry. And, if you guys just believe this, short and shut your mouths. Like, you guys, they're wrong. They're obviously trying to make things go down. So I like this part right here. Brandon talks about the good parts and then the bad parts of the report. This kind of sums it up here. Order book inflation. This has been a personal frustration in the industry and has been somewhat of a joke amongst the inner circle of VTOL experts and analysts. This report correctly highlights this somewhat humorous narrative that both Joby, Archer, Eve, etc. all push. What he's talking about here is getting a bunch of pre-orders, LOIs, MOUs, basically to, inflate their books and show like, oh, we have 500 million coming soon because they promised they're going to buy our aircrafts at this price. Well, who knows if you can even produce them and then sell them at that price. And there's just a lot of ifs and, it's not binding also. So this is something that he actually talked about, and he doesn't want to take orders himself. They only have very few, I think, with Jet Set Go of India. And actually, I don't know the progress with that. I'm quite interested what that looks like for Brandon. But again, they're not like all these other companies inflating their books. So that's quite interesting to look at and think about. Aerospace design. There are and have always been significant challenges with many VTOL designs. This should be no surprise at all. And this report correctly flags some challenges, lack of progress, transparency that has hurt Archer in my humble opinion. Aeroelastic issues associated with the structure itself, the complex manufacturing tolerances with the main rotors, the simple fact that they are trying, like Beta, to fare them into the wind, all create very significant baseline configuration problems. I wish them all the best with this. What he's talking about here, I'm going to show you a clip in a second, is basically that design ultimately is going to have to be the winner. Like, he's saying a lot of their designs are not great. He's not saying they're not uncertifiable, like the Grizzly report is saying. He's just saying, aerospace design tends to favor this. I'm going to cut to this clip. What he's basically saying is what he said in my podcast here that I really like, which nature tends to favor certain type of design, and what they're building is not aerodynamic. It just doesn't seem to be the solution for what we're going after. And I like to talk about this a few times, but there will be a winner in a certain type of design. If you look at all planes right now, Boeing, Airbus, they all look the same. There isn't a different type of plane. They all have this, long structure with the two wings. There isn't like a helicopter type of plane that has, a rotor up top and flying, 10,000 miles above the air or 30,000 above the air and long distances, right? There are certain types of designs that are favored for certain types of things. And he's saying here, I really like this. This is really the big bread and butter of why I think Hovr is going to win, is that he knows all the other designs are a bit flawed and his is better. So, all right, let's cut to the clip real quick.
In the end, it comes down to more engineering and aerospace engineering that does to trying to make it look like a bird or something like that, right? If you tried to force that, especially, there's a scale factor problem, right? There's no birds that are as large as our aircraft. And Reynolds numbers and aerodynamics change quite a bit when you scale up, right? You couldn't make a giant bumblebee fly, right? It just doesn't work. If you scaled a bumblebee up by a factor of 100,000, that mechanism doesn't work at that scale. And it's a fascinating thing in the world. Nature seems to also prefer certain scales and certain designs at certain scales. And yeah, so yeah, fair enough. I've read all about it, but unfortunately, I can't come up with a good story that we were inspired by some sort of shape. We just did the thing that made the most aerospace engineering and operational sense.
So yeah, I think that sums it up for what he's talking about here. Let's talk about the bad parts. All right, part one, the delayed information gap that I was talking about. He's saying that, well, I'm not sure if this is what he's saying, but my takeaway from this is maybe, there's a bit of an information gap. Archer isn't telling us everything, and there might be some slight slip, I guess, in development. Even if a slight slip in development, maybe timelines and stuff, just like I said, how their factory wasn't built on time, but it was still built. Who cares? You guys are wrong. Just because there's a little information gap doesn't mean, this is why to short the company. But I guess it's just one of many takes, but, they're wrong in that, he's saying. Okay. Case study 1 and 2, they're just cherry picking the most complex helicopter, tilt rotor. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Less interesting here. This is, the more interesting part I liked was this, but let me just read this for you. Basic aerospace engineering misunderstanding. Okay, that's right. This report is riddled with incorrect information. One great example is the 5th bullet under case study 2 that states eVTOL aircrafts with multiple small rotors can be much more prone to entering VRS. This is simply wrong. Dr. Brown of not going to say that name, I don't know. Aerospace does a great job of documenting the physics. I'll include a picture that should illustrate this. Now, I don't know about the technical stuff Brandon's talking about here, but basically to sum up, it looks like he's just saying they clearly have a misunderstanding in basic aerospace engineering, and he obviously knows his stuff. So, I guess he included some chart here that means something. I'm not going to act like I know what it means, but I like that he knows his technical stuff as a CEO, which is awesome, you know. Joby versus Archer comparison. Each section is riddled with, look at Joby's great progress contrasted with Archer's doing nothing. Most sections are so overtly promotional that it is alarming. I guess this could allow you to make money on both the short and long sides. Congrats on that. And then everyone talks, Brandon this, Brandon that, Brandon this. This guy is like, Brandon, I disagree with you on 2 technical points. Look at Dr. Brown's work, blah, 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 this video, this work, blah, 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 Brandon this, Brandon that, Brandon this, Brandon that, Brandon this. And then Brandon goes,
blah, blah, blah.
Something here, but this is what I like, this response. Dave Smith, how did I guess you would disagree? For some background, I have read Dr. Brown's study in detail, watched the video presentation, and our team has had the good fortune to speak with Dr. Brown about our particular configuration with high disk loading. I don't understand the rest. Gets a little more technical for me, and he starts showing some graphs, but I just like how he responds and says, I know what you're talking about. I think you're still wrong, and I'm disagreeing with you. And Dave Smith responds, Brandon, makes sense. I like your design way more than the wacky multi-prop designs. I look forward to the unique challenges that loom as you scale your design up to a full size. A little bit of I don't know what to call it right there. A little bit of throwing some shade right there. He's like, I wonder what challenges you're going to have, even though I like your design. Lots of exciting learning and explorations ahead. Maybe I took that wrong, but I like that he's basically like, okay, I'm going to shut up. I think you're right. You know what you're talking about. Am I wrong here? I don't know. I'm not too sure if well, he's the CEO of Robinson Helicopter Company. Actually, I don't know this guy, but I know the company. I didn't know he's a CEO, so he actually must know his stuff. So I maybe read this wrong, but I just like that quick exchange of like, oh, he agrees with Brandon. Brandon knows what he's talking about. And what my takeaway there is the design for HOVR is going to be a winner. We're going to talk about that a little bit in a second. Let's talk about here what it actually takes to get certified, because a lot of people don't know this information. So in the US, you have to get type certification, which is what everyone's going after right now. Joby, Archer, all the companies. I thought initially, and probably what a lot of people think, is like, oh, once you get type certification, I thought that's the holy grail. Day one, they're allowed to fly. You know, we're going to have air taxis, boom, boom, bam, whatever. And that's wrong. No, that's just the very first step. Well, there's some other certifications even before Type Cert, but this is like, let's say, the big number one goal. And then there is production certification, which is going to be to produce the aircraft. This is just to make sure the aircraft is good enough. The design wins, which right now no one has type certification. And this is the big, like, if, you know, who's going to win the design? Just like we said, how Boeing and Airbus all have the same looking aircrafts. That's kind of like what type certification is about, like getting the full design to win. It's like approved, and then it's going to be about like producing it, right? So then you have to get a certification for actually building it out. Whoops. And then a standard for airworthiness certificate. And basically what that means is it's kind of part of production certificate. It's, you know, now that you're able to produce the aircraft for the design that we approved, there has to be a standard. Every aircraft has to look the same, right? It has to function the same. There can't be any things different about one aircraft than the other, right? And then there's operator certificate, which, by the way, HOVR is not going after. I believe they're only going after these first 3. Actually, they're only going after right now TCCA, which we'll get to a little later. This is for the US. Just a quick reminder, HOVR is not in the US, it's in Canada. So they're going after these first 3 kind of for Canada, you can say. But they'll get to it in the US as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. So there's operator certificate. That's basically, you know, think of it as the United, the Deltas of the world, right? Who's going to actually, the airliners, right? That's different than the actual production build of the aircraft, just like Boeing and Airbus, okay? And then we have pilot ops rules for powered lift. I guess this is basically just for the pilots, right? Afterwards, like who's allowed to fly these aircrafts. You know, they have to be licensed and get through certain regulation, because it's probably not the same as flying a regular plane. You can't just be a regular pilot, right? So there are those 5 steps in the US. In Europe, it seems to be less. In China, by the way, it seems to be more, but I don't even care about China. It's a whole nother market. I don't invest in anything Chinese, and yeah, not going to get into that now, but whatever. In Europe, there is kind of like the first one, type certificate, basically means of compliance, which gets you, I guess, type certificate. And then you have the production for it, and then you have the operating for it. So I guess it pretty much skips the standardness, or I guess standard is probably part of the production. C of OA, that's probably, I don't know, so C of OA for each aircraft, that's probably the standardization for each aircraft, right? Just like here, standard airworthiness certificate for each aircraft. So that's probably baked into it together. That's why I don't know what these 3 letters are, but and then you have the operating part. So they don't have the pilot's part, but I guess there probably is something with this. Now, all this, of course, was with ChatGPT, so there may be some discrepancies here. But generally speaking, this is the process. This is what makes sense to me also after learning about this. And HOVR, where are we in the process right now? Oh, well, I already showed you this clip, so I'm going to delete that. All right. Hover chart. Let's show you. Let's talk a little bit about the process. So actually, HOVR, since they're in Canada, they have to go to the TCCA, which is different from the FAA, but it has bilateral agreements to the FAA. And basically what that means is if they're approved with the TCCA, they don't have to go through the same steps as other companies to get type certification. They just have to file like some other simpler paperwork. It's probably a much lesser timeline, a much cheaper timeline, so they probably save a lot more money and time. It's, you know, it's almost just like imagine getting a license for anything, you know, and me in real estate. If I have a license in Florida to perform real estate, if I go to Georgia or any other states, I don't have to go through the same process to get their license. There's like a smaller test, a smaller course to take just to get that approval, right? So you can think of it as kind of the same concept for, you know, a lot of things that have sort of bilateral agreements, right? So that's the big thing there. And interestingly enough, John Maris is someone who, I don't know exactly what he does for TCCA. 3C. TCCA is like the FAA, but 3C is a company called Canadian Certification Center, I believe. And basically what they do is help get people approved to the TCCA. And John Maris is part of 3C, and he's actually partnered with HOVR. You guys should just know that on the side. So that's a very good thing for HOVR, because we basically have an insider knowing how to get the aircraft certified is kind of what I'm trying to tell you here. So that's really cool. Now let's talk about why HOVR is really different compared to everyone else in getting certification. That I think this is one of the biggest bull signs to me, and why, well, this is just awesome. So let's check it out. HOVR is the only company that has partnered early on with a certification company, 3C that I told you from John Maris, to get their plane certified. And basically what this means is they have certification baked into the design. Whereas every other company, what they're doing is they're building first demonstrators, then they apply for certification, okay? They build a demonstrator, then they apply for certification. Lilium, they built a 7-seat jet demonstrator, and then they're working with the European organization later. So why is this different? Well, basically what this means is they have to, here, Joby, Archer, Vertical Lilium, built first, adjust later, leads to redesign headaches and cost overruns. Rather than, imagine like, I don't know, just like anything, like imagine just, instead of building the plane and then being like, hey, test it, tell me what's wrong, and then they're telling you what's wrong and like you have to go fix it, spend all that money. They're like, at the same time, Hovr is checking while they're building the plane, they're telling them what's wrong, what you cannot do. So they're not fully building it, they're building it while they're getting approved and certified. And that's why Hovr is going to get certified probably a lot faster than all the other ones. And The market cap is low because, well, they're just a lot early on in the process compared to the other ones. Joby and Archer have flown their first test flight much earlier. If you compare and look where they are, Archer, for example, was just 10 times more compared to HOVR. I'm not going to get into all that, but I'm not going to get into market caps too much. I'm just trying to tell you here that HOVR has baked in certification in the design, which is just completely different than most of the other companies. Eve didn't do that, but they did partner with Embraer, which has long certification history, but Eve eVTOL program itself didn't start with built-in regulator partnership. And same with Beta. They have close ties to Boeing, but they did not have it built in. So that's a really big difference compared to anyone else. Hovr is the only company in the world pretty much that is doing this. I tried to look into other companies. There really isn't any other ones. All of the other ones are somewhat close. Let's say Jaunt Air Mobility. They announced close ties to Transport Canada, TCCA, but they did not actually have any formal pre-design contracts with Horizon. I mean, with 3C, just like Horizon has. And really no one has. I looked into even UrbanAero looks like they had something going on with 3C, but I was wrong. Nobody is doing what Horizon's doing. And so what this means is, just like Brandon said, we are going to make this happen. I think, like he said, the design, nature favors a certain design. They're going after this the right way with certification in mind. And I really like the design. Seems like other people like the design. I didn't know that guy is from Robinson Helicopter Company. That's pretty cool. The fact that he likes the design, and a lot of people are looking at this company. It seems like it's really, really going to grow a lot. The cancel stuff is really interesting. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's in the podcast with Brandon. A lot of things are really interesting with this company, and for many reasons. For the design, for the certification, it looks like when he says we are going to make this happen, they are freaking going to make this happen. These things are going to fly. It's going to be certified. Whereas Archer, we really don't know. I mean, their thing is not that aerodynamic. There might be a lot of problems. I see no red flags with HOVR. We spoke a little bit about dilution, but that's normal. It's part of the game, and they're diluting, like we said, they're using the money for good things, just like good depth versus bad depth. So not getting into that too much. You can watch my past videos on that. But again, this thing is going to fly. I don't know when. People ask me timelines, price targets. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know when, but it's going to happen. It looks like there's no reason for it not to happen, and I'm just really excited. So until next time, guys, stay thinking, question everything, and peace out.